The nightmarish void of space stretched infinitely around the USS Magnificent, its sleek black hull nearly invisible against the backdrop of dying stars. Inside, the air was thick with tension as Commander Simon Jones stared at the distorted transmission playing on the holographic display before him. The message had arrived just minutes ago, a desperate distress call from Rondora, a human-colonized world now under siege. The voice, garbled and filled with static, barely formed words between screams. They're inside, not human. Can't fight them, please. The signal cut out with an abrupt shriek. Jones exhaled sharply. Another colony under attack. Another slaughter in progress. He turned to his team. 5 of the deadliest men in the Navy SEALs, the best humanity had to offer. Their faces were set in grim determination, their weapons already prepped for deployment. "We're going in," Jones said, his voice low and firm. "Command confirmed our intel. This isn't just another Cypherian assault. The Queen is there." A silence heavier than the void settled over the room. The alien Queen, the being responsible for the relentless aggression of the Cypherian Empire, was not just a leader. She was a mind-controlling parasite that bent an entire race to her will. Every order, every war crime, every campaign of planetary subjugation, all orchestrated through her telepathic dominion. Kill the Queen, collapse the Empire. Lieutenant Carl Cooper leaned back, his tone bordering on disbelief. If it were that easy, why hasn't anyone done it before? Jones met his gaze. Because we're the first ones crazy enough to try. Ryan Stokes, their tech specialist, scoffed under his breath, running a final check on his drone scanner. That's what they'll put on our tombstones. Noah Andrew, demolitions expert, grinned, the glint of adrenaline already showing in his eyes. "Long as we make those bastards dig the graves first." The ship's AI chimed in, signaling proximity to the drop zone. The men exchanged brief nods before standing, fastening their gear with the ease of men who had done this too many times. Cooper secured his sniper rifle. Cole, their hand-to-hand combat specialist, adjusted his reinforced gauntlets. There was no ceremony, no grand speeches. Just 5 men stepping into the abyss, knowing full well they might not return. The drop pods ejected with a muted hiss, plunging them into the chaos below. The descent was a violent affair, the atmosphere shaking the pods like dice in the hands of fate. Fire and ruin stretched across the ground, the colony reduced to rubble, the sky thick with acrid smoke. Human corpses lined the streets, twisted in unnatural positions, their faces frozen in horror. As soon as their boots hit the ground, the SEALs moved like phantoms, silent and deadly. The city had become a hunting ground, and they were deep in enemy territory. Jones raised a fist, signaling a halt. Through the visor of his helmet, his HUD painted a grim picture. Cypherian patrols sweeping the wreckage, their elongated forms moving with eerie precision. Their armor pulsed with an unnatural glow, their movements fluid but not entirely their own. "They're being puppet," Stokes whispered. Cooper cursed under his breath. The Queen's influence was stronger here. These weren't just soldiers. They were extensions of her will. A flicker of movement. A figure stumbled from the wreckage ahead. A human survivor, bloody and wide-eyed. He was young, no older than 20, wearing the tattered uniform of a colony defense officer. The second he saw them, his face twisted in horror. "No, and no getaway. She knows you're here." Before anyone could react, his body convulsed violently, a guttural scream ripping from his throat. His arms jerked upward, his eyes rolling back as the Cypherian glow bled into his veins. "Shit, hostile." Cole moved fast, but not fast enough. The boy let out an inhuman shriek before lunging with unnatural speed. Jones fired once, a clean shot through the skull. The body collapsed, twitching. A pulse rippled through the air, invisible yet suffocating. Every Cypherian in the sector turned in unison. Then, the world erupted in chaos. Gunfire cracked as the SEALs dove for cover, their weapons spewing bursts of tungsten-tipped rounds. The Cypherians move with terrifying speed, some taking hits and still charging forward, their bodies fueled by something beyond mere biology. Andrew launched a charge, blowing apart a group trying to flank them. Cole engaged in close quarters, his enhanced gauntlets crushing skulls with sickening force. Jones led the push forward, but for every enemy they dropped, 3 more seemed to take their place. "This isn't working," Stokes yelled, barely dodging a serrated blade aimed for his throat. "Move to extraction point Bravo," Jones barked, voice cutting through the chaos. "We're not dying here." The fight became a running battle, darting through the ruins as the Queen's forces closed in. Each step, each shot, felt heavier, like something was pressing against their very minds. The Queen was watching, learning. Then, the whisper started, a voice inside their heads. "You cannot win." Jones staggered but forced himself to keep moving. "Stay focused. Don't let her in." They reached a collapsed structure, ducking inside for temporary cover. The Cypherians hesitated outside, as if waiting. Inside, a grim discovery awaited. Rows of human captives. Strapped to makeshift pylons, their bodies twitched, their expressions blank. Wires ran into their skulls, their minds being forcibly assimilated into the Queen's network. Andrew swore violently. "She's using them like antennas. She's amplifying her range," Stokes whispered, voice hollow. This is why our control is stronger here." Jones clenched his jaw, his hands balling into fists. These weren't just prisoners. They were fuel. One of the captives turned his head, barely conscious. His lips parted, voice cracked and weak. "She's waiting for you." A spike of pain tore through Jones' skull as the Queen's voice slithered deeper. "You will kneel." Jones dropped to one knee, his vision warping, twisting. Shadows slithered at the edge of his sight. He saw Earth burning, the Queen's fleet descending like a storm, her voice inside every mind, whispering them into submission. He saw himself kneeling, head bowed. Then another voice, his own. "Not today." A gunshot rang out. Cooper had fired point blank into one of the pylons, shattering the connection. The mental grip weakened. Jones inhaled sharply, forcing himself upright. The team looked shaken but standing. The whispers receded, for now. "We're ending this," he said, voice steel. "Get the charges ready." They moved fast, planting explosives along the structure's main power cores. Outside, the Cypherians began screeching. The Queen knew. Andrew set the final charge, glancing at Jones. "We light this up. She's going to come down on us with everything she's got." Jones looked at the captives, the ones beyond saving. This wasn't mercy. It was liberation. "Do it." The team pulled back, detonators primed. Jones gave one last look at the horror the Queen had wrought. Then he pressed the trigger. Fire consumed the sky. The explosion rippled through the city, a beacon of defiance against the darkness. The SEALs vanished into the ruins, heading toward their final target. The Queen had felt their defiance, and now she was coming for them. The flames still licked the shattered remnants of the power station as Jones led his team through the ruined cityscape, their movements silent but urgent. The explosion had sent a shockwave across Zephyr Prime, a clear act of defiance against the Queen's dominion. Every step forward felt like a march deeper into the abyss. The streets were graveyards of twisted metal and broken bodies. Human corpses, some weeks old, others fresh, were left where they had fallen. The air carried the thick, metallic stench of blood, and something worse, something wrong. Cooper took point, his sniper rifle at the ready. "You feel that," he murmured, his voice barely above a whisper. Stokes, pale beneath his visor, gave a slow nod. "She's watching." Closer than before. The Queen's presence was no longer a distant pulse pressing at the edge of their thoughts. Now it slithered into their minds, tendrils of psychic malice testing for weak points, searching for a way in. Jones clenched his jaw, forcing his thoughts into sharp focus. He wouldn't let her in. He couldn't. They moved through a network of alleys, avoiding the main roads where Cypherian patrols stalked the ruins. The creatures moved strangely now, their formations erratic, as if the Queen's attention was divided. That, at least, worked in their favor. Ahead, a collapsed building formed an impassable barricade. Cole signaled for a halt and studied a map on his wrist display. There's a way through the old transit tunnels beneath us. Not ideal, but it keeps us out of sight. Jones gave a sharp nod. We move. Andrew pried open a service hatch, revealing a descent into absolute darkness. One by one, they dropped into the tunnel below. The air was thick, stagnant. The walls of the tunnel dripped with moisture, but as they pressed forward, it became clear that water wasn't the only thing seeping through the cracks. Organic growths lined the ceiling, pulsing faintly, their dark veins stretching like a web of nerves. The Queen's corruption was here, buried in the bones of the city itself. Cooper exhaled sharply, his grip tightening around his rifle. This isn't infrastructure anymore. It's alive. Andrew ran a gloved hand along one of the walls, frowning at the slick texture. Feels like cartilage. This place is turning into a hive. They moved cautiously, boots making no sound against the damp floor. The deeper they went, the more the structures around them ceased to resemble anything man-made. The walls narrowed, reshaped by the Queen's infestation, curling inward like the throat of some vast creature. Then the whispers returned. They weren't words this time, not entirely. They were impressions, flickers of thought not their own. Jones caught a glimpse of a burning earth, the sky blackened with Cypherian ships. He saw his men kneeling before a monstrous silhouette, their weapons cast aside, their faces blank and hollow. Cooper let out a sharp breath. She's pushing harder. Stokes's breathing had quickened, his fingers twitching at his side. She's not just reading us. She's testing us. Jones glanced at him. Testing what? Stokes swallowed hard. For cracks. A sound echoed from ahead, a wet, scraping noise that made every man freeze. Weapons came up in an instant, barrels trained on the tunnel's curve. Then the thing emerged. It had once been a human, that much was clear. Tatters of a colony officer's uniform clung to a body twisted into something unnatural. Its limbs were too long, its fingers hooked into grotesque talons. Its face, half devoured by the Queen's corruption, twitched erratically, as if caught between life and something far worse. Its eyes, black and endless, locked onto them. It didn't attack immediately. It studied them. Jones felt the weight of its gaze like a physical force. This wasn't a mindless drone. It was something different. A voice that wasn't entirely human rasped from its ruined throat. You are nothing. Jones fired. The round tore through its skull, but the body didn't fall. It twitched, jerked, then lunged. The tunnel exploded into chaos. More figures, former humans twisted into monsters, crawled from the darkness, their movements erratic but impossibly fast. Andrew's shotgun roared, sending one sprawling. Cooper's sniper round punched through another skull, but it barely staggered. They're regenerating, Stokes shouted, falling back as one of the creatures lashed at him with razor-sharp fingers. Jones sidestepped an attack, driving his blade into the thing's throat before firing 2 rounds into its chest. It convulsed but didn't stop. Cole hurled a flash charge. The detonation of white-hot light sent the creatures reeling, their corrupted flesh burning in the aftermath. They don't like light, Andrew shouted. Then let's light them up, Jones growled. They moved with ruthless efficiency, tossing incendiaries and setting the tunnel ablaze. The creatures shrieked as the fire devoured them, their bodies twisting in unnatural agony. The SEALs pushed forward, knowing they couldn't afford to be trapped here. The tunnel led them out into a cavernous chamber. It was unlike anything they had seen before. A throne room. The architecture was alien, a grotesque blend of organic and mechanical, but there was no mistaking what this place was. The heart of the infestation, the Queen's seat of power. and at the far end, waiting, stood her voice. The creature was taller than any Cypherian they had encountered, its body covered in segmented black armor that pulsed with a faint glow. Its head was elongated, crowned with cruel ridges that gave the impression of a mockery of a crown. It radiated power. It spoke, and the voice was not its own. "You have come far, but you will go no further." The words didn't come from its mouth. They came from within them. The queen was speaking through it. Jones felt his muscles lock, his breath catching in his throat. The weight of her will press down like an ocean crushing a drowning man. Images flashed through his mind. His men, one by one, falling to their knees, their minds unraveling, their bodies ceasing to be their own. He fought against it, fought with everything he had. "Get out of my head." Pain lashed through his skull. The world blurred. A gunshot rang out. Cooper had fired, the bullet punching through the creature's chest. The psychic grip shattered. Jones stumbled forward, gasping. The creature staggered, black ichor dripping from the wound. But it did not fall. Instead, it smiled. Not a human smile. Something else. Something wrong. "You think yourselves strong?" The queen's voice coiled around him. "You think you can resist?" The chamber shook. The walls pulsed. Jones realized, with a cold knot in his stomach, that the queen was no longer distant. She was here. Andrew's voice was sharp. "We need to move. Now." Jones forced himself to his feet, forcing his mind to focus. The mission wasn't over. They weren't done. Not yet. A deep, resonant hum vibrated through the walls of the cavernous throne room, a sound that did not come from any machine but from the very structure itself. The chamber was alive, a pulsating biomechanical cathedral of the queen's making. The walls were not built, but grown, layered with sinewy, fibrous material that throbbed in slow, rhythmic pulses. The air was heavy with an unnatural humidity, thick with the scent of decay, and something deeper, something old. Jones tightened his grip on his rifle, his pulse hammering in his ears. The Avatar, the queen's chosen vessel, still stood before them, black ichor oozing from the bullet wound Cooper had inflicted. Yet it showed no pain, only amusement, as if the damage was nothing more than an inconvenience. "You continue to fight, even now." How fragile, how predictable. The voice slithered through Jones' mind, forcing its way in like a needle driving into the base of his skull. He gritted his teeth, forcing his thoughts into sharp focus. "Predictable," he growled. "Then you already know how this ends." The Avatar tilted its head, its ridged, skeletal mouth twitching into what could almost be called a smile. "Yes." The floor lurched beneath them. The walls shuddered. Something enormous, something unseen, shifted in the vast depths beyond the throne room. Andrew spun toward the movement, his fingers already priming a charge. "I don't like that." Stokes had gone pale, his breathing shallow. "She's waking up." Jones didn't hesitate. "Move!" Gunfire cracked as Cooper fired again, his sniper round tearing through the Avatar's skull, shattering its elongated head like brittle glass. The creature didn't even have time to react before it collapsed, its body crumpling in a lifeless heap. The queen had abandoned it, because she was here now. A low, guttural vibration resonated through the chamber, not a sound but a presence, something vast and unseen pressing against the walls of reality itself. The ceiling split open, the fibrous material peeling back like the petals of some monstrous flower. Then she descended. The queen was colossal, her form stretching beyond the limits of the human mind to comprehend. She was not merely flesh, nor machine, nor entirely corporeal. She was something else, something greater, something older than any war humanity had ever fought. Her body was a towering amalgamation of chitinous plates, shifting tendrils and radiant energy, pulsing with an alien rhythm that seemed to sync with their very heartbeats. Her head, crowned with curved, jagged ridges, bore no true eyes, yet they all felt her gaze upon them. No one spoke. No one could. Then she whispered, "You are mine." The world fractured. Jones staggered, his mind spiraling into an abyss of memories that weren't his. Visions flooded his thoughts. Worlds burning, armies kneeling, civilizations consumed and repurposed in her image. He saw Earth, saw himself, saw his men bowing before her, their bodies twisted, their minds shattered. No! He clenched his fists, forcing the visions away. He wasn't hers. Would never be. But the others. Stokes was already faltering, his eyes wide and distant, his rifle hanging limp in his hands. Cole had dropped to one knee, shaking, sweat beating down his face. Andrew clutched his head, grinding his teeth against the pressure. Cooper, the only one still standing, raised his rifle with a snarl. "You want us? Come take us." He fired. The bullet never reached her. The air rippled, reality bending around the Queen's form. The round simply vanished, swallowed by the force of her will. She moved, not with steps nor with any semblance of human motion. She shifted, her vast form folding through space in an instant, closing the distance with impossible speed. Her tendrils lashed out. Cole screamed as one pierced through his chest, lifting him from the ground. Blood spattered onto the organic floor beneath him, his body convulsing as the Queen drained him, pulling something unseen from his flesh. His eyes dimmed, his body went limp, and then, as if he had never been more than a whisper in the universe, he was gone. The tendril retracted, leaving nothing behind. Cooper roared, firing again. This time, Jones joined him, unloading round after round, Andrew hurling incendiaries. Stokes, blinking out of his daze, activated a disruptor pulse, sending a shockwave rippling through the chamber. The Queen shuddered, her form flickering, her tendrils writhing in response. She could be hurt. Not killed, not yet, but hurt. Jones seized the opportunity. Andrew charges. "We bring this whole damn place down." Andrew didn't need to be told twice. He moved fast, planting high-yield explosives along the chamber's structural weak points. The Queen's presence recoiled, and for the first time, her voice was not amusement, but anger. "You defy me?" Jones gritted his teeth. "You bet your goddamn life we do." A sudden pulse of energy tore through the air, slamming into them like a tidal wave. Jones was thrown back, his helmet cracking against the ground. Static danced across his HUD, his vision swimming. His body wouldn't move. He could only watch as the Queen extended a tendril toward Stokes. The tech specialist was frozen in place, his body trembling. His breath was shallow, his hands shaking. "You are already broken," the Queen whispered to him. "You see them dying. You know the truth. Submit, and the pain ends." Stokes's expression twisted, terror, despair, then something else. Resolve. He moved, not away, but forward. He plunged his combat knife into the tendril reaching for him, twisting it deep. The Queen screeched, the sound reverberating through the chamber like a shock wave. Stokes moved. Jones bellowed, forcing himself upright. The younger man turned, half stumbling, barely dodging as another tendril slashed through the space where he had stood. Andrew's voice cut through the chaos. Charges set. Jones didn't hesitate. Blow it. Andrew triggered the detonator. The world erupted. The chamber collapsed, fire and debris cascading from above. The Queen's scream tore through the air as the walls gave way, the weight of her own throne crushing inward. Jones grabbed Stokes, hauling him toward the exit. Cooper and Andrew were already moving, dodging falling debris, the floor shaking beneath them. Behind them, the Queen vanished beneath the rubble. They didn't stop. They ran, through the crumbling tunnels, through the collapsing ruins of her dominion, until at last they emerged, out into the open night, the burning city stretching before them. The Queen was buried, but not dead. Not yet. Andrew turned, watching the ruins settle in the distance. Tell me that did more than piss her off. Jones exhaled, chest heaving. We hit her hard. Stokes wiped blood from his mouth. Not hard enough. The ground beneath them rumbled. They weren't done yet. The ground trembled beneath their feet, a low, rumbling exhalation of something massive shifting below the wreckage. The ruins of the Queen's throne room had collapsed in on her, but she was not dead. They had wounded her, weakened her, but the fight wasn't over. It would never be over until she was eradicated. Jones adjusted his grip on his rifle, his knuckles white against the steel. The team had made it out barely, but the air was charged with something primal, a force beyond sound or sight. It pressed against their bones, a crawling sensation inside their skulls, a promise of vengeance. She's coming, Stokes murmured, voice hoarse. Andrew spat onto the cracked pavement. Yeah? Then let's not keep her waiting. The distant fires painted the ruined skyline in flickering orange, the embers swirling in the choking winds. The city was crumbling around them, as if the very planet sensed its ruler's distress. The Queen's psychic hold over Zifra Prime was fracturing, and with it, the order of her empire. But she was still alive. Jones turned to his team, sweat mixing with blood on his face. We hit her hard, but we need to finish this now. We don't have time for an exfil. If she gets back up, Earth is next. Stokes wiped grime from his forehead. We don't have enough firepower to bring her down. Not permanently. Cooper chambered a fresh round into his sniper rifle. Then we improvise. Andrew shook his head. We need a way, not just blind fire. That thing in there, she's not just another target. Jones looked at the ruins behind them, the massive cavern that had caved in on itself. Then he looked up to the sky. It wasn't just Earth that had something to lose. She's not just controlling the Cypherian military, he said, the idea forming even as the words left his lips. She is their military. Every drone, every ship, every fleet. Her mind threads through it all. Stokes's eyes widened as he caught on. If we sever her connection, she won't just be vulnerable, Cooper finished. She'll be alone. Andrew exhaled. Which means we need to force her to use that link against herself. Jones's fingers danced over his wrist console, pulling up the orbital network. The Cypherian flagship, the Zotharian Prime, still hung in orbit above the city, one of the largest dreadnoughts in their fleet. It was fully armed, waiting for orders from her. An idea took shape, one that was either brilliant or suicidal. We lure her in, Jones said, locking eyes with each of them. We make her use her own fleet against herself. Stokes stared at him. You want to bait her into ordering an orbital strike on herself. We're dead either way, Cooper said simply. Might as well take her with us. A deep, resonant thrum vibrated through the ground. The rubble behind them shuddered. A low, guttural exhalation rolled across the ruins, a breath drawn from a throat as vast as a canyon. The psychic pressure spiked, raw and unfiltered now, no longer a whisper but a roar. Andrew took a step back. She's digging herself out. We don't have time, Jones snapped. Stokes, can you hijack the flagship's comms? Stokes was already moving, his fingers flying over his hollow interface. If she's weakened, there might be a crack in her network. I just need. He winced as another pulse rattled his skull. A minute. Jones turned to Cooper. You keep her busy. Cooper gave a grim smile. Wouldn't miss it. The rubble exploded. A column of blackened chitin erupted from the ground, tendrils of dark energy spiraling outward. The remains of the throne room shattered, sending jagged shards of organic metal in every direction. The Queen rose, her colossal form unfurling. Larger than before, her wounds knitting together with unnatural speed. Her face, if it could be called that, was contorted with something new. Rage. Her presence crashed down on them like an ocean storm, raw and unchecked. This was not control anymore. This was fury. You dare. Her voice boiled the air, warping the space around them. The buildings cracked, their steel supports groaning under the weight of her will. Cooper raised his rifle, standing his ground. We really do. She moved, not with speed, with inevitability. Tendrils lashed out, the earth splitting as her presence expanded, reaching beyond her body, warping reality itself. Cooper rolled aside, firing as he moved, each shot finding its mark, but it did nothing. She wasn't just physical anymore. She was becoming something else. Andrew threw a detonation charge, the explosion tearing through her side. The wound closed in an instant. Cooper reloaded, jaw tightening. This isn't working. Almost there, Stokes gritted out. The Queen descended, her form casting a monstrous shadow, her tendrils carving through the ruins as if reality itself were unspooling. You fight, but you are already dead. Jones acted. He ran straight toward her. Cooper barely had time to react. What the hell are you? Jones leapt, rolling beneath a sweeping tendril, diving toward a jagged spike of debris still half buried in the rubble. And he grabbed it. The Cypherian neural conduit, one of the Queen's primary links to her fleet. He drove his combat knife into the pulsating core. The effect was immediate. The Queen screamed, her body locking in place, her tendrils convulsing. The connection backfired, raw data flooding into her, distorting her form. Stokes seized the opening. Got it. Rerouting her command system to the flagship. Now. The Queen's own mind gave the order. From the blackened void above, the Cypherian dreadnought responded. A lance of searing white fire speared from the heavens, an orbital strike meant for an invading armada. But it was aimed downward, straight at her. Her scream split the sky. The blast struck her full force. The shockwave detonated outward, incinerating everything, the very fabric of the city disintegrating in a column of raw, cosmic fire. Jones was thrown backward, the heat searing through his armor. He hit the ground hard, rolling through shattered stone, his vision blurred from the impact. Everything was white fire and silence. Then, slowly, sound returned. The Queen was gone. The crater stretched where she had stood, a hollowed-out abyss of melted ruin. The psychic weight pressing against them had vanished, her presence ripped from existence. Jones coughed, pushing himself onto his elbows. His team was still breathing, barely, their armor scorched but intact. Stokes was on his back, panting. Cooper was already struggling to his feet. Andrew looked up at the burning sky, his voice hoarse. Tell me that was enough. Silence. Then, for the first time in what felt like eternity, peace. Jones took a breath. It's over. They had won. They had killed a god.